Fine. We are now going to discuss very briefly about the unit operations. Unit operations are nothing but the individual operations which are doing on the sample of water or on the body of water, on the effluents. You can call it whatever you want. Unit operation is a very generic term. It's a term which is coming from chemical process industries. Okay, so every operation you do here goes as a unit. So it's one batch which is going to do the work on. So these are the basics of water treatment. We are going to remove the contaminants. Okay, and then we are going to comply to requirement regulations. The regulation we follow is 10,500. Okay, so this 10,500 has all the limits of the various pollutants. Okay. Well, I will not ask the limits in the exam. What are the pollutants? I will be asking. Okay. So if I say, is this a pollutant? You should be in a position to say, yes, it's a pollutant. No, it's not a pollutant. In reality, everything is a pollutant. Okay. If you see say for instance material, any material, can you just give me some material? Sulfates. So if you are having more amount of sulfates beyond a particular thing, it's going to be harmful. Fluorides, for instance, okay, fluorides in very small quantities is very beneficial. However, the moment it goes beyond a little beyond a threshold, it becomes very dangerous. Iodine, you name it, everything within a limit is very good. So literally most of them are bad. However, some are toxic, some are very deadly. When compared, see, for example, if you're going to drink seawater, you're not going to die. You're not going to die just like that. But if you're having a little bit of cyanide or something, results are different. So this is why we are having all these things. And these are the physical characters. I'm not going to go through this. These are the chemical characters. These are some things which are doing in the lab. Okay. So what you will have to do is you will have to understand what happens. For example, alkalinity causes bitterness to water. Okay. Hardness. The main problem is it is not going to let soaps do their work according to us. But boilers they have a different problem. Same thing applies to fluorides. Metals, especially heavy metals, are very dangerous. Example: mercury, lead, and all these things. The main problem what we usually have is there is a biological magnification. What is this biological magnification? Sorry? No, no. Biological magnification is if you are adding say 1,000 parts per million of or just 10 parts per million of mercury, but it is safe, everything is fine. What happens is plankton and all these things absorb this. This is eaten by fish. So 10 million ppm is there. Fish eats so much, bigger fish eats that fish, keeps on going. So much so to the extent that when the big fish is eaten by men, the amount of permissible heavy metal is much higher. Okay, this is biological magnification. So, although you might be within the limits when you're disposing the water, there is another effect which we should be very careful about. So, as civil engineers, probably you may not be asked to do this calculation. Chemical and process engineers normally do this, but we should be aware that such a thing is going to happen. And what are these organics and nutrients? Organics are these organic materials which are essentially food. Okay, it will be food for somebody. If not for you, for some bacteria or some virus or something, it is going to be a food. Organic material and nutrients means they help it to grow faster. Nutrients help it to grow faster. For instance, if you're going to put all your fertilizers into the water, what happens? The principal problem is all the bad plants take the fertilizer and thrive. Okay, for example, moss on the surface of water. It is not good because it's going to block the water from getting oxygen. So many things happen. Anaerobic conditions take place. So they become nutrients. pH should not be acidic nor basic. Acid also has problem. Base also has problem. It has to be neutral. And chlorides. So all these are things which are very harmful for us. We agree on this. And these are the things which are harmful for humans, all of them, bacteria, virus, etc. In particular, these coliforms and all these things cause diarrhea and all sorts of diseases. Usually, If suppose we are seeing coliforms in the water, it means that sewage has got mixed with the water. It is an indicator species. It means that something bad has happened. So if you are finding it, better take care. So this is, if you are an environmental engineer, please look into these points. So these, each of these indicate the presence of certain bacteria or virus indicate certain bad condition is happening. Probably at this stage we may not be requiring to go into a very in-depth analysis of what happens, cause effect analysis, but we will do it. Now I am going to go in through the basic unit operations. We will have a we'll have a little time with this, and based on this we will have our questions.
Water supplied to consumers has actually been through a few processing and treatment stages before being distributed. Rain that falls into the dams or rivers flows to the water intake where it will be pumped to the water treatment plant. Here, the raw water is treated by going through the process of aeration, coagulation, flocculation, sedimentation, filtration, disinfection and conditioning. Raw water intakes withdraw water from a river, lake, or reservoir over a predetermined range of pool levels. Floating debris such as woods, leaves, aquatic plants and others are screened at the intake. After screening, the denser suspended matters are removed by allowing the water to pass through chamber where it settles down to the bottom. Submersible pump abstract and transfer raw water from intake to water treatment plant. Aeration removes gases and volatile compounds and also to oxidize certain dissolved metals. Pumped from the intake is mixed with air at the aerator. Tastes and odors in raw water evaporate readily, and are released into the atmosphere by exposing as much water surface to the atmosphere as possible, and introducing turbulence via the cascaded aerator. Coagulants, usually alum, are added leading to the formation of microscopic particles in water. This is followed by gentle agitation causing small particles in the water to collide and combine to become bigger settleable flocks. All polymers used as flocculants in water treatment must be water-soluble, water solution form. The active polymer in emulsion products is tightly coiled in droplets called mitals. These droplets are polymer emulsified in an oil phase. The coagulation process involves adding aluminium sulfate, polymers and hydrated lime to the water. These chemicals are called coagulants, and have a positive charge. The positive charge of the coagulant neutralizes the negative charge of dissolved and suspended particles in the water. When this reaction occurs, the particles bind together, or coagulate. This process is sometimes also called flocculation. The larger particles, or floc, are heavy and quickly settle to the bottom of the water supply. This settling process is called sedimentation. The flocks are allowed to flow through the sedimentation tank as uniform as possible for long enough period for them to settle. The clarified water will be collected from the top. The next step in a conventional water treatment system is filtration, which removes particulate matter from water by forcing the water to pass through porous media. The filtration system consists of filters with varying sizes of pores, and is often made up of sand, gravel and charcoal. The settled water then goes through filters where the fine particles and bacteria are trapped. The clean water then goes to the clear water tank. In the clear water tank, the water is disinfected to destroy microorganisms which still remain in water after filtration. The chlorine compound are normally used for disinfections. The pH is adjusted using hydrated lime. Fluoride is also dosed at the treated water to prevent tooth decay. Nowadays, the water treatment plant were automatically sync with computerized controller which make the task easier for the observation of water level, raw water intake and disinfection process through programmable systems. From the clear water tank at the water treatment plant, treated water is pumped through long pipelines to balancing reservoirs with sufficient height for distribution by gravity to service reservoirs in various demand centers.
Okay, so the last thing, probably there was one new term or one term which might not be very commonly heard, the balancing tank. What is this balancing tank? In fact, even in the sewage treatment, you'll come across this term, equalizing basin or balancing tank or whatever. If you notice, in the morning the demand is going to be very, very large. Everybody is having their bath, everybody is cooking, everybody is doing everything. So at that time, what happens? The amount of water withdrawn is at a very high rate, but the rate at which you can treat water is very, very small. So much slower. It's not going to be the same real-time rate. So this balancing reservoir is essentially a place where the water can be stored so that when the peak demand is there, you can discharge it. This is something like your aquaguard or something which you have at home, the RO systems. The RO system fills water at a very slow rate, or when you need water, 1 glass of tumbler, you can just immediately draw, maybe a little more, maybe about 5 liters, you can immediately withdraw. Now coming here, these are the unit operations which you saw there. You had an intake structure. Okay, so what are the types of intake structures? You can just put a well in the middle of a river, and then the water there will not have these barks and all these things floating. You can just draw the water. Or nowadays in India, especially if you look at the Pala River, there's no water flow at all. So how do you draw water? You dig deep wells, usually of very large diameter, in the bed of the river, and then you draw water. I have seen many of these in the Kaveri River. Okay, so these sort of intake structures. In fact, in many of the videos, we had a small, very short clipping of the intake structures. They don't show much of it. So that's about the intake structure. In all the videos, almost you would have seen the screening operation. So there are different types of screens, bar screen, rotating screens, and all these things. Because each type of screen will require to be frequently cleaned. Okay, so the next time you go through the videos which we have in the presentation, please note the way they show. Yes, they are mechanically cleaned. Yes, it is automatically cleaned. You cannot be manually cleaning the screen every time, not at that rate. Okay, not at that rate of flow. And then you got mixing of chemicals. Okay, so many chemicals are used. Coagulants are used, some flocculants are used, and disinfectants are used. Basically, these are the main chemicals which are added. So when these are added, you need to mix them according to the type of chemical used, or rather the chemical which is used. For instance, in the morning we were talking about the flash mixing, where you have to mix at a very fast rate. On the other hand, you cannot be expecting flocks to form. Suppose you're doing it at a very high rate. So you need to strike a balance. And another thing is also there, this aeration process is also basically a mixing process. If you notice in this one, they had a water flow as a fountain, and it fell over different layers. What are they doing? They are trying to induce turbulence. They are trying to increase the surface area of water. By increasing the surface area of water, the contact between atmospheric air is increased. Okay. Normally, if you look at your sewage, your drain, the water which is there will turn into a black color or something only after a couple of days. What happens essentially, nutrients are there that attracts, those become surfaces, or areas on which absorption of the whatever bad things we call takes place, and slowly the oxygen level comes down. Okay, so basically they try to increase the oxygen level. You will find that both these things are very closely interrelated in the sense that sewage treatment as well as the drinking water treatment, the unit operation is very similar. Correct, correct, correct. So in any case, you are only trying to reduce the amount of anaerobic bacteria. Okay, in this case, you will not be normally expected to take sewage and to give it for drinking. That's a general principle. So, sorry, where? Hmm. That is true. So you can do something like, if it is basic, if it is very basic, when if it is having a very high pH, you can make it more acidic, or vice versa also. In fact, in the next video, which I'm not showing today, which I'm planning to show tomorrow, there's a process where they add sulfuric acid in the process. Here, if you see, they added lime. Okay, so basically what I'm trying to demonstrate is unit operations are all similar, but how it is being done is different. If a particular condition takes place, if you find that the sewage, raw sewage has certain parameters, how are you going to make it suit your requirement? What is the requirement? That objective also should know in the beginning itself, or the onset itself. Okay. So then another thing which we have not come across, I mean sedimentation and flocculation, coagulation, we have seen quite a lot of videos. Sludge processing is something which we have not seen at all. What is this sludge? You are getting these flocks and everything. All these are very fine colloidal particles which have been made bigger. They are still small only, just that they are held in place by that positive charge which is there in that coagulant. So this will be a very big problem to dispose. Okay, so you will understand it when you really take a very, like, clay and all these things, they'll be holding the water. You can't dry it just like that. To dry sludge, it's a very huge, very big challenge in fact. So they call them thickness. So where we were working on an iron and steel plant. Particularly, it was called iron washery. So what? Washery. Okay. So they wash the ore, they make it, or beneficiation. To be very precise, the term is beneficiation. So to make the ore, very bad ore quality is only there. So you're somehow trying to make it a little better. But what happens is you get a lot of sludge, a lot of sludge. So we were asked to design a thickener for it. We had our own process groups who told us how the thickener should be, what is the size, everything, and we actually designed the structural portion of that. But still, the number of operations that actually take place is so huge. I was quite in the sludge thickening process. I got a video which I will show you also, where the parts of the thickener is demonstrated. Which one? Depends on what sludge you are getting. For example, my iron sludge you can't use anywhere. Okay. Yeah. So depending also the sewage also, what type, for example, from Ambur, what you get might not be useful for the agriculture purpose, because it's having a lot of metals and all that put into place. Okay, so sludge processing is a big challenge and a big thing in this system. Transporting the sludge, drying the sludge, to get a sludge dry itself is such a huge task. So actually, if you have tried to see, I had a very nice experience, but as an experience which I'll remember. The drain near our house, like it was a big, uh, massive, like river like thing, the river which was made into the sewer. So they had dredged it and put the contents on the side. It looked nice and hard, but you know what happened when I stepped in? You can guess. It was like an eggshell on top. The head leg went in, very bad smell. Okay, so it was sickening, to tell the truth. So that is what is this sludge. That's what we're talking about here. So from out of experience, like some things you can't express with thing, but I'm sure you'll be able to imagine what it is. So this sludge handling is a big challenge in itself for any person who is. And one more thing is this disinfection. So for the drinking water, the disinfection was what all you saw: chlorination, ozonization, And one more thing is, sorry, yeah. So they were also showing ultrafiltration as a means of disinfection. In the sense, water only can go, the other things can't go. Okay, that's in a subsequent. Activated carbon is actually an adsorbing agent which absorbs the odor causing agents on its surface. It may also be microbial, but it is not a disinfectant. Disinfectant should kill. Should kill. So boiling is one way of actually disinfection. Another, I mean, of course, we don't do it. Another effective way is using ultraviolet light. Okay. So probably in one of the subsequent videos we will have all of this. Okay. So this is what I expect from you in your answer papers. Okay. If the process is told, you should be able to draw a flowchart like this. I don't want the exact flowchart symbols. Make it neat, make it presentable, make it justifiable that marks are due. This one diagram will show that you know the process, plain and simple. But it doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to be like this. If suppose we are going to say in these two classes or three class, two days or something which you have interacted, you would have found at least 4 or 5 different ways the same water is being treated. Okay, so we can always play around with that. But what is important is please try to see what are the principles involved. Once you know the principles involved, you can always justify at any forum that you are right. That is the main thing which you should do. That's the confidence which is required. So these are the water sources. Okay. So depending on the type of water source we have, the type of intake structure will also vary. Okay. The main thing is we are in India. We are mainly depending only on subsurface water. Okay, very rarely like Red Hills, this Nagarjuna Dam, all these Metro Dam, all these are there. But I don't know like how much the rest of the country can afford to have such sources of water. Not stop. Actually, you will make it at a yeah, you will have it at a slower rate. Yes. So that's the same thing. What I'm saying is, many of the cases, India has. Sorry. It is there. Viewers are there to raise the head. So all that is there. However, I am talking on a very general. For example, Kerala, my theory will not work. Okay, they will have some surface. They may have streams which other parts will not have. Okay, so dams, wells, springs. Okay, so rain catchment. I am coming to this rain catchment. Okay, so this rain catchment area is a very important thing to be managed. Today, Chennai's flood was because of poor management of watersheds. Okay, what happened is watershed is the place where we are bothered about the water, like the water in the watershed arrives to a source of water. For example, river. So all the water that can flow into the river forms the watershed of the river, or a lake, or a dam, or a tank, whatever you call it. Okay, so if you look at it, so these are the things that actually matter. So for watershed, to know exactly, suppose a river is going to this morning we were seeing about how much population is there, so how much water is required. Okay, so now if we know the watershed, then we can say that a particular source of water is going to be good. Okay, so for example, how much time the rain is going to be there, what is the intensity, soil moisture content. What happens when soil moisture is more, it will not be able to absorb much more water. So soil composition, very rocky soil, bedrock is there, and the water will just simply flow. I mean, like there's no way it can be held in place. Okay? So vegetation cover, if vegetation cover is there, what happens? Runoff gets low, it will be there. When ground slope is large, automatically the water is going to flow. Human influences, this is the problem of all the flooding. All the engineering college, all the new colonies, all of them are inside a lake. So the people are complaining of flooding. It is not that water came into their house, they have gone to where the water should have been. So human influence plays a very important role in this entire process. So watershed management is one very important aspect of of water resources. When you are studying water resources, that is a very important thing. So once you are able to manage the watershed, you can be assured of the water in the intake, I mean in the reservoir which you are taking. Yes. So I am stopping here.